Wildlife photography is a risky business, no doubt about it. Not only that you're at the mercy of nature, the terrain you're in, the subjects you're photographing. There's always a bit of risk when you head out in the woods. But carrying the gear and the photography itself, the different positions you end up, can actually put yourself at quite a high risk of bodily injury. That's going to be the focus of today's video. I often hear people say, I can't wait to get into wildlife photography when I retire. Sure, you can sit in the back of a Land Cruiser and get driven around on safari and kind of, minimal wear and tear on your body for sure. But many aspects of nature photography are very physically demanding. So I want to go through and talk about some of the things that I have changed with how I carry the gear, the footwear I wear, trying to help to minimize some of those strains on the body, and hopefully they'll really help you. If you're like me, I'm kind of 54 next month, and not young anymore. If you're interested in wildlife photography, there's a good chance you've led an active life. I was hockey, mountain biking, skiing, climbing. As great as those sports were, they all, in one aspect or another, led to quite a bit of injury over the years. A lot of those injuries have come back to haunt me. Wildlife photography, it's my job, and I'm out in the field, as much as possible. If I'm not trying to minimize that wear and tear, I might not be able to go out shooting. If you're just getting into wildlife photography in your later years, you might not really be thinking about how hard it can be on your body. And so we're going to go through, I want to talk about kind of the things that you might encounter. We're going to start at the bottom and we're going to work our way up. Ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, lower back, and your neck. They're all typical things that you will hear photographers moan and groan about. It just kind of goes along with it. And one way to think about it is my camera and tripod is not far off the weight of this 25-pound dumbbell. So you can imagine a lot of times people throw the camera and tripod over the shoulder and go hiking up the mountain. You can just imagine how much of a driving force that is with every single step. So there's a lot of ways that you can go through and to help minimize that stress, because you can eliminate gear for sure. You can get your pack weight down as low as possible, but there's going to be a cutoff where you can't go below a certain amount of weight and still get the shots you're looking for. So you can imagine I go out for a walk. I try and walk as much as possible. And when I head out the door with my phone, a bottle of water, and a shorts and a t-shirt, I weigh about 175 pounds heading out the door. When I'm heading out with camera, tripod, fanny pack, or a full backpack, fully kitted out, I'm weighing anywhere from 215 to 225 pounds. It's a significant difference of weight and strain on the body that you really have to take into account. I'm shooting with the Nikon Z8 with the 200 to 500 lens, which is about 8-9 pounds. My tripod's about 8-9 pounds, especially with the video head on it. I've got all my YouTube equipment as well. So that gear adds up quickly, and it's a lot of gear I just can't eliminate. I don't carry macro lenses. I don't carry a lot of extra gear when I'm out, but just the basics. You're just walking around a lot heavier than you would normally. But then you're also heading into the mountains. You're heading off trail. Going to be hiking distances, and how you carry your gear, what you're wearing when you carry your gear, and also where you carry your gear will significantly impact where the strains are put on your body. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is basically knowledge built up over years of essentially punishing my body. Heading out back in the day, I shot, Nikon cameras. 300 f4 was my go-to lens with the 1.7 teleconverter for my, first bunch of years foray into wildlife photography. And I was always happily just slinging it over shoulder. I used a Gitzo 1325, which is quite a light full-size tripod, with the Joe Boo Jr., which is about just over a pound for the gimbal head. reasonably lightweight, but even still, every single step I take, I'm getting about 12 pounds of load on my shoulders. Every step, especially start hiking downhill, every step you're kind of giving an amazing amount of impact on one side of your body. Even if you switch it during the day, you're still shock loading the side that you're carrying the camera on. It doesn't balance out. You're not getting an even transfer of weight on every step. Something to be very, very cognizant of, especially if you are a little bit older. A lot of times, you throw that camera over your shoulder and you go, because of the injuries I've had and the wear and tear on my body, I don't even try and walk a couple hundred meters with the camera slung over my shoulder, especially if I've got the video head on. The Manfrotto video head just adds an extra 3 pounds to the camera and lens setup. You really notice the significant extra weight on each shoulder, that if I do that, I come home and I will inevitably be in a lot of aches and pains that evening because of it. So when we're talking about weight load transfer and all of this, basically we're going to start at the ground up. We're going to look at footwear first, and some things you need to look at in your footwear, and some things you may not have actually considered with footwear, and how it's going to impact how everything aligns from there. So like I said, we'll get into how I carry the camera gear in the next video. We're going to take a look at footwear and how you can take a look at your own footwear and make some determinations on, whether you need to buy new footwear, you need to upgrade your footwear, and some of the things you really need to look for. So when you think about these chronic injuries, your knees, your ankles, hips, a lot of that is going to start with improper footwear. And today we're going to be talking about hiking footwear, and then we're going to talk about essentially backpacking footwear. Kind of got two categories. Some of this I will definitely go out the door for shooting in that, that 2, 3, 4K range. But then there's also the 6 to 12, 15K range that's going to involve altitude, climbing hills, mountains, the like. And there's definitely going to be different footwear requirements based on that. Also, the amount of gear you're taking. If I'm going to go out just with my camera strapped onto my cotton carrier, that's definitely different than carrying a full backpack and heading off down the trail. So for footwear, there's a few things you want to look at. So you've got your low cut, you've got your mid cut, and you've got your full backpacking boot. Low cut versus mid cut, you're definitely going to get better ankle protection and support from a mid cut or a proper boot. But that doesn't mean low cut shoes can't be supportive. And there's a couple things you want to look for when you go to buy a shoe. First off, what you want to do is you're going to definitely try and flex the shoe. So you want to flex the shoe, and that's very, very important. So grab the heel and the toe, and you want to flex the shoe. The other thing you want to do is use your thumb and your two thumbs, and you want to push into the middle of the forefoot section of the shoe. And then you also want to grab it torsionally right here. And you can see how this shoe is quite worn, but you can see it's still got a lot of stability in the shoe itself. An older version of it, so this shoe is quite a bit more worn, and even this one is still quite a solid shoe. Even with the forefoot, torsionally, this is really important, that twisting there. So you can imagine a lot of lighter weight shoes, a lot of cheaper shoes, what's going to happen, they don't have any built-in shank. Whether it be steel, which used to be, you don't see steel shanks in a lot of things anymore, polyurethane, depending on nylon, depending on what the frame of the shoe is built of, will depend on how solid the shank is. And the shank is basically, it's what makes the shoe rigid through the center portion here and how much stability you have. So you can imagine if you have a shoe that doesn't have any stability this way, as you plant your foot here, the shoe can twist and you can roll out of it. So it's really important. It's funny, I've never really a huge fan of Merrell over the years. I used to be in the outdoor business for many, many years, and I was never a big fan of Merrell. And then I came across these shoes. This is the Merrell MQM, and it was on sale. Felt really comfortable, so I decided to give it a go. What a fantastic shoe. This is actually my third pair of these. They are really comfortable, really supportive. A couple of years ago on one of my interior road trips, I actually wore this shoe for the entire 3-week road trip. I didn't even put the boots on. It's a really supportive shoe. It's not a shoe I'd recommend if you're carrying a heavy load all the time, but awesome fitting shoe and definitely worth giving a go. And they're really nice. They do have a nice wide toe box, which is really nice as well. The only downside of these, I found durability is, I would call it the weak point of the shoe, but the fit and stability through the life of it is so great. I would still recommend them, even though they might not last quite as long as you might like. The Vibram outsole in these is it's got great tread on it, but if you're walking a lot on roads, they will wear out fairly quickly. You're probably going to get about 500K out of a shoe like this before the sole, the outer tread is worn out quite a bit. And these ones have been well worn. The other thing, so we've talked about the bottom of the shoe, but the other thing we want to look at is the heel cup itself. So this shoe has got, you can see this one is getting quite soft now. You can see how it's broken down quite a bit, where this one, the newer one, is definitely a bit stiffer. And if you look at the Speed 2, which is the latest shoe I just bought, it's got quite a bit stiffer heel cup on it. The heel cup is a really important aspect of the shoe, and that's what helps to align your foot as you heel strike, and it also helps to keep your heel in place as you're walking forward. So if you notice with these two shoes, the older shoe, you can see it's starting to cantilever out, where this one is still quite straight. And you'll notice as I strike, so if I put weight on this shoe, you can see how, so if I weight the heels, you can see this shoe is definitely cantilevered out a little bit more versus the newer shoe, which is much straighter. And then when you get the brand new shoe, it's completely straight. There's no movement at all. So leaning out is called supination. If you were to roll in, it's called pronation. And so when you look at your shoes, you want to take a look at the sole itself. So if you look on this tread, you can see how the tread is worn on the outside here compared to the inside. So that means that I supinate when I walk. And it depends. My left foot will pronate a little bit. I broke my ankle many years ago, so it has a tendency to collapse a little bit. So you want to look at both your shoes, because that will play into a little bit when not only the type of footwear you need to buy, but also when you need to replace your footwear. So you can see how this shoe, because it's starting to roll out quite a bit, compared to this shoe, which is about a year and a half, 2 years newer, this one wouldn't be sufficient on the trail anymore, because as I heel strike, it wants to roll out. So every heel strike, my foot is now cantilevered out. The problem with that, as you're striking, as it puts the pressure out, that's then putting pressure on the knee joint and the hip joint as you're walking. So every time you take a step, everything's pushed out, and then it's kind of trying to force its way back in. It's fine if you're only hiking down to the beach, you're walking a kilometer here and there, but you're putting that weight on your body, that you're walking out the door, that extra 30 or 40 pounds, that little bit of extra motion off to the side, in or out, can be very hard on the body. Something to really take into account. So you definitely want to look at your shoes. You can see how the newer shoe is not as worn on the outside as the older shoe. So this one's still got a little bit more life in it. And I've just replaced it last week with the newer, the Merrell, the Speed 2, we'll take a look at in a second here. So this shoe has still got some life in it. So what happens, what I generally do is my shoes will kind of get put down. So this is now in the garden shoe. This one still has got some life, so I still will go walking in this. If I'm doing any just straight pavement walking, I'll still use this just to kind of wear out the sole a little bit, just because as it's smoothed out, it's lost some of its tread for out on the trail, so it's not as good as it used to be. So one of the things when we're talking about supination and pronation, a huge factor that plays into that, not just your footwear, but also the insole that you pick. So if I take out, an insole that comes with the shoe versus a Superfeet insole, this is a very well-worn Superfeet insole. So Superfeet are an aftermarket insole company. I'm a huge fan of them, have been for years. I find them, they are designed where they help to align your feet so that your foot cushions itself. It's not a big foam insole. It's actually a very, very thin old insole that provides a really nice arch support, but it also, very importantly, provides a really good heel cup. So if you look at these two insoles, they look very similar when I'm holding them up here. But this one will completely go flat, where this one is very rigid. So what happens here is with the Superfeet insole, your heel is planted firmly within the cup of the insole. So it adds an incredible amount of support without adding any extra weight to the boot, the shoe you're wearing. It just helps to provide that really nice cup so your heel sits firmly within the shoe itself. Then also, again, the arch on this shoe is completely flat, where this one is very stiff. It's not a very high arch, it's not a really pronounced arch, but the combination of the heel pocket, the heel cup with the arch support, it makes it so that your foot will now have its own arch, will help to support itself, and your heel and arch are aligned very nicely within the shoe, so that every step you take is much more vertical. It helps prevent a lot of that pushing out that you see with the older shoe, the supination. It really helps that it'll help to align your steps. Obviously, depending on if you've had injuries like I have with my left side here, you might need to go and get proper orthotics made based on if you've had injuries. That's something you might need. I would definitely encourage you to start with something like Superfeet, and you might find this will help enough that you don't need to go and spend hundreds of dollars on a full orthotic. But something to really keep in mind is that replacing your insoles, and definitely these go in my Scarpa boots and just live there. Scarpa's insoles are very similar to the Merrell insole here, just a thin foam insole. They don't really provide much other than initial cushioning when you first buy the shoe. With Merrells, I will use the Superfeet in them as well, especially as I get a little bit older, and depending on how my knees and hips are feeling. Then said like last week, I just picked up, this is the Merrell Speed 2 Gore-Tex. It's based on very similar outsole to the MQM. They're kind of a similar heritage, very, very similar, nice flared outsole as well that will give you excellent stability. So this is a shoe or a boot. I'll call this a mid-cut shoe personally. This is one that definitely would suffice for most of your wildlife photography needs. Gore-Tex, so it's waterproof. You'll find that they're about half the price of the Scarpas. They're not inexpensive by any means. You're not going to get half the life out of this compared to the Scarpa. So a full boot is as expensive as they are, is probably still economical to wear as your main footwear when you are going out shooting, and they definitely will provide more heel protection and rollover protection just by being a much more solid platform. But these guys, you can see torsionally are very, very stiff. Even toe flex wise are excellent. You're not going to get any deflection in the sole itself. I do like the fact these have got a decent heel wedge in them, so that if you're going downhill, they will help to stop you from sliding as you go downhill, even more so than the MQM, which is a little bit flatter. So not as ideal if you're going down dirt slopes, scree slopes, and like that, where you might have some slide. This is not as ideal, where this has definitely got a more aggressive outsole. So, like I said, great fan of these. One thing when you look at these shoes, you can see that this is what they call a straight last, where the last from heel through to the forefoot is fairly straight. The MQM has got a little bit more curve, but it is still a fairly straight last, so that basically your foot, is quite straight. You'll see some shoes where the front of the shoe is more curved. Be aware of that when you're buying shoes. I personally find with a curved last shoe, for me, they're meant a little bit more for like a rock climbing aspect, scrambling around standpoint, than I find for a walking any sort of distance. The problem I find with them, they tend to be, because the shoe itself will curve inwards essentially, I find I have less stability from a rollover standpoint. So tend to roll the ankles a little bit more with that style of shoe. So I definitely prefer a straight lasted shoe as a regular hiking shoe. Something to keep in mind when you're out shopping for them. Depending on the shape of your foot, you might find you prefer curved last, but something to be aware of, where you kind of look for that straight through last on the shoe as well. And then lastly, Scarpa SL. Active. I've done a whole video. I did kind of a 1,000 kilometer review on these. I think these are pushing 2,000K probably in that sort of ballpark on them now. Phenomenal boot, absolutely rock solid. You can see still very, very square. One thing when you buy a pair of boots like this, these boots are relegated to the trails only. I don't walk on asphalt with them. They'll last a lot longer. You know, if you're constantly wearing the sole off, you can definitely get these resoled. But something to be aware of that you will like. It's a good idea to keep a heavyweight boot to the trails, and they'll last a lot longer for you. And this boot, can't recommend it enough when you're looking at the full gear, full load into the mountains, on the trails, any sort of terrain, any sort of weather, mud, snow, anything like that. Phenomenal hiking boot. He said, I'll leave a link down below. I've done a full review of this boot. He said, this is on the heavier side of things, and it's a fantastic boot. Since we've talked about, like I said, with the insoles and the heel cup and making sure that you're wearing new shoes that aren't being pronated or supinated through wear, the next thing up on the list is going to be your knees. And the knees, wildlife photography is notorious for being hard on your knees. If you're coming from, they say, those sports like skiing and the like, where your knees have taken a bit of a beating over the years, wildlife photography is not going to be any easier on them.